I was told to make a presentation for about 20 minutes, and I hope to keep it within that. And so uh, I've written a couple of pages, and I will just read it out to you, and hopefully it makes sense. And maybe it will give you sufficient info to start a discussion later on. Right, people from the Indian subcontinent who migrated from foreign lands left behind their families and relatives and their homes. However, they carried with them the ancient baggage of caste. One would imagine that after decades of living in the UK, the newer generation would have forgotten about the castes uh, in the Indian subcontinent. Britain, after all, ditched feudalism and transformed into a capitalist mode of production nearly 200 years ago. The sad reality is that the practice of caste, thought to be an aspect of feudal society, is deeply rooted in the Indian community in the UK and elsewhere around the world. The Dalit community in the UK largely follow Hinduism and Sikhism. I will speak about the caste amongst these communities where my experience comes from, whilst acknowledging that the practice of caste is prevalent amongst Muslims, Christians, and other communities also that have a link to the subcontinent. It needs to be said that the caste is essentially rooted in Hinduism, which has strongly influenced other religions in the South Asian subcontinent. In the UK, Hindus practice Brahmanism in their homes and temples. That is the Brahmanical section of Hindus practice Brahmanism. Like in India, one will not find anyone from a lower caste holding prominent positions in the temples, such as being members of the committee or becoming priests. They simply are not allowed, and certainly not allowed to become priests anyway. You will find that Valmiki community, which is a very lower section of caste within the Hindu hierarchy, they belong to mostly the cleaners sections and scavengers. They practice Hindu religion in their separate Bhagwan Valmiki temples, and these are very different to the Brahmin or the upper caste temples, and the two never actually meet. Those who follow the Sikh faith face similar discrimination. Over the years, this nasty form of discrimination has resulted in different castes within the Sikh Punjabi community setting up their own gurdwaras. Now there are Jat Sikh gurdwaras, Guru Ravidas gurdwaras, Ramgiriya gurdwaras, etc., each identifying with a specific caste with their separate places of worship. And yet they all follow the same Guru Granth Sahib, which is their holy book. Caste discrimination in the UK is clearly evident in the school playgrounds. Often a Jat pupil will ask the other pupil, which Gurdwara do you go to? Uh, when a Dalit pupil replies, thereby revealing his caste background, she is often subjected to derogatory remarks and called stinky chamar, etc., a reference to low menial category of work this group of people carry traditionally. It has been said that in the main, discrimination comes from the so-called upper caste, and the low caste people are victims. But discrimination in reverse also happens and is evident, but it is to a much, much lesser extent. The caste system survives on the practice of endogamy, whereby one does not marry outside their caste. So intercaste marriages do occur in UK, but are not that common. Many such marriages are discouraged and disowned by the parents. We see matrimonials published in the newspapers and websites seeking suitors for Pacific caste. We increasingly hear boasting of particular caste in Punjabi pop music, which causes offense to the so-called lower caste. Such music is being played in the national radios around Britain. We have come across a case where a Dalit radio presenter is sacked for using the Ravdasiya greetings, Jai Gurdev greeting, instead of using the traditional Sikh Sat Sri Akal greeting. At a wedding, a Jat woman is noted to say, "I will allow my daughter to marry a black man or a Muslim, but I will kill her if she marries a Chamar." I have come across a case where a man living in England gets to know that his brother's daughter has eloped and with an outcast boy back at home. This man travels to India to help his brother kill both the daughter and the boy, the so-called honor killing. The brother got life sentence, but the man who went from England escaped to England and lived a normal life thereafter. Anti-Caste Discrimination Alliance was formed in 2008. At the time, the British government was in the process of reviewing the equality law and was drafting the new equality bill. We took the decision, that is the Anti-Caste Discrimination Alliance, took the decision to ask the British government to make caste a protective characteristic in the equality bill. Our request was refused, saying that there is no evidence of caste discrimination in Britain, which we knew what was not the case. So we set about the task of collecting evidence in Britain. We held 9 focus groups, group meetings up and down the country, basically interviewing people after the congregation of the services and things like that in various religious places. Over 200 people participated. We had an online questionnaire inviting people to share their experiences with us, to which we had over 100 responses. The results of the online survey were expertly analyzed. The examples of discrimination from the focus groups and the survey were then presented in a report, Hidden Apartheid, Voice of the Community, Caste and Caste Discrimination in the UK. I'll just, that was the report we presented. I can give you links. You can find it on the internet later. The report had academic input from no fewer than 4 professors and academics from different universities in the UK. We launched our report in the House of Lords on November 2009. The report launched, we were able to put together a joint, with the report, we were able to put together joint statements from numerous organizations in support of our findings. The government, however, said that the evidence in our report was anecdotal. And in response, we decided to escalate our campaign against the Dalit community and the House of Lords, which eventually then led to propose an amendment to the bill. The House of Commons agreed on April 2010 to include a provision in the Equality Bill, which could at later date be brought into force. This was subject to research that the government would commission and have its own findings and results. The Equality Bill received a royal assent in April 2010 and became the Equality Act 2010. So basically, the Equality Act included the word race, included the word caste amongst race and sex and other forms of discrimination. Although this, although this fell short of the ACDA's and other stakeholders' demand for full protection at the outset, we saw the change in the law as being comparable to the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833. It brought hope of some justice to the victims and potential victims of caste-based discrimination who have until now suffered in silence. A report was published by the National Institute of Economic Social Research in December 2010. It identified existence of caste-based discrimination and harassment of the type covered by the Equality Act 2010, which basically vindicated what our report findings were. The government sat on its own report findings for 2 years. After intensive lobbying from the pro-legislation group, the government instigated yet another study. In December 2014, researchers submitted to the government a report of feasibility study looking to the practices and issues, practicalities and issues around conducting the research into around the issues of caste-based discrimination in the UK. The anti-caste law lobby argues the anti-caste law. So whereas we were asking for a law to include caste in discrimination, there was another lobby which opposed it, and they argued that that any law on caste discrimination would institutionalize caste in the UK. So we had a tremendous amount of anti-lobbying opposing our view, and this was largely led by the Hindu Forum and the Hindu councils, which are basically outfits from the RSS international wing of Hindutva in India. And we know that actually, although they say you're going to institutionalize caste in Britain, but we do know that Hinduism is being actually taught in the schools as part of the religious teaching, and caste is actually being talked about and explained to the students. The so-called Varna system, untouchability in Harijans, this kind of thing is actually being taught in the schools. So, on the one hand, you're saying that caste doesn't exist and is not to be talked about, and yet this is actually happening in the schools and education system around the UK. ACDA demand that the UK government removes this and other similarly misleading literature on Hinduism, and that reinforces caste and its equalities in the UK from the schools. So 10 years after the provisions against caste discrimination being written into the Equality Act 2010, we have this part of law still not implemented. Our support from the United Nations Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and that the British government must implement Section 95A of the Equality Act, which provides caste to be an aspect of race, has fallen on deaf ears, despite numerous campaigns from many organizations, lobbying the Prime Minister, MPs, Lords, and several demonstrations in London outside Parliament, Downing Street. The government remains bowed to the pressures from the Hindu fundamentalist organizations like the Hindu Forum, Hindu Council, whose strings are being pulled by the Vishwanath Hindu Parisad, which is a global Hindu organization, under the lead, backed by the RSS alike. The government has abandoned in our view, the government has abandoned the fundamental principles of equal rights and humanity, and has failed the victims of caste discrimination in UK. In 4 separate cases, we have helped victims of caste discrimination in industrial tribunals, courts, and we have and helped them win their cases, and substantial compensation has been awarded. If you are interested, I can elaborate on these cases later. Bearing in mind the time constraint, that is all I really want to say in my presentation. I would like to say that we need to discuss the role played by the Hindutva forces against the anti-caste discrimination law, the impact of the legislation on the victims of caste discrimination in UK, or the effect of the UK legislation in other countries, and what effect the legislation might pave the way to the international monitor of caste atrocities in India. Casteism is a system of exploitation akin to slavery. The nexus between Hindutva forces, neocons, both in Britain and USA, and the Zionists is there for everyone to see, which represents a new form of fascism, which is on the increase through, in various parts of the world. Casteism is becoming increasingly evident and talked about in America. The same situation exists in many other parts of the country, other worlds as well. I'll just end there and take it from there. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay. Okay, we'll start the discussion now.
Could you
if you like, this.
Could you say a bit more about the complexity of what's called a caste system in terms of the jati system in Britain, and by extension, also the in Muslim communities, the biradari systems, the kinship systems, which are linked, in my view, in my mind, to caste overall. It's a South Asian culture phenomena. So the jati system, caste system, and in the Muslim communities, the biradari system, the kinship systems of mutual support and so on. So you just referred to the word caste, but is, would you like to elaborate on its complexities?
Yeah. I think the caste system, the biradari system, the jati system are basically the same thing. Biradari probably is referred to in the Muslim community, but essentially they all are related to what the traditional work of the community has been. So if somebody has been working with disposing of animal carcasses, they would normally be, their occupation would be, making living out of using the hide, making shoes. So they would become, traditionally, they would be known as the chamars. Or you have, people who worked with, wood, they would become, they would be woodworkers. But so biradari, whether it's biradari or jati, this is essentially what it means. And the system, the caste system, does not allow one to escape its traditional occupation and move into another. Even though I have never worked with leather, I will never, I've never done that. But now I've been an engineer, but I'm still assigned somehow, and I cannot escape it. and all the marriages and who my children marry will be dictated by that setup. And so I think the brotherly system is exactly the same. You know, I would have thought, I think that I can't, you know, the Khans and the Tatars and things like, they are the upper echelons of, they're the upper stratas of society. You know, they would will be landowners and feudal lords and people like that. And below them will be the lower rankings. In the traditional Hindu sense, there are four societies divided into four castes. You know, Brahmins being the upper section. Below them are the Kshatriyas. Brahmins would normally be the preachers and the scholars and the educators. And below them would be the Kshatriyas. And they would normally be the warring class, the fighters and defenders of the land and things like that. And below them would come the merchant class, you know, the Vaishyas, I think. And they would be the traders, you know, trading in merchants and things like that. And below that, the fourth class would be the Shudras. And Shudras would normally be the manual workers, you know, the people who till the land, the people who actually produce the houses and things like that. There would be the Shudras. And then there's a class of people below these four varnas, which are so-called untouchables. And they don't fit anywhere in them four systems, in four sections. So people that actually fall out of this system. And they were traditionally called the untouchable. Now the most accepted term is the Dalits. So this kind of categorization of people, and the Hindu system, even in the modern days, like I said, one might become a magistrate, you know, but he still is actually assigned to, you know, known to be of that particular group. I'm not sure how much more I can add on that.
That's fine, thank you. Yeah, and just a follow-up question. I read somewhere that the exact figure is unknown, but I've read some reports that suggest that in the UK there are maybe 50,000 up to 200,000 Dalits across the UK in various shapes and forms. Is that your understanding, that kind of figure?
That is correct. I think we in our report, this the hidden apartheid report, we said there are about 250,000 people belonging to the Hindu community. Yeah, to about 250,000, and we said that probably about 100,000 of them are in the lower category, of the caste system, and we estimated that even if 10% are actually victims of caste discrimination, that is still a very intolerable sum. But in our view, discrimination against one person is not acceptable. Never mind if there is more than that.
As a group, the group is larger than travellers and Roma, so-called gypsies, and it's larger than the Jewish community in Britain, but it's completely hidden.
They're more powerful than we are.
Okay, Saif.
Yeah, just a couple of points. The Jati system and the caste system, they're basically the same thing, but there is a slight difference, because when we talk about Jati is part of, I don't know, there is a reverb happening from somewhere.
Where is that noise coming from? I'm trying to mute.
Can you mute, Tom, can you mute everyone?
Yeah.
As an admin, can you mute everyone? I will, or then I'll.
Yeah, I'm muting. I can mute. Okay.
You can mute everyone.
Yeah, I muted everyone. Yeah.
Okay, so the Jati system is basically part of the Varna system. And in this, it's fundamentally different from the sort of a remnant, not the sort of slight reflections of the Varna system, which I found in other sort of South Asian religious groups. For example, Christians also have some sort of a Jati system, but it's nowhere near compared to what we find in Brahminist sort of communities. So Varna system fundamentally has rootings in the Vedas. The first Veda, which is basically Indo-Aryan, the first sort of scripture of Indo-Aryan religion, that is Rig Veda. Rig Veda has Purush Sukta, Purush Sukta, which has this particular this particular hierarchy set. This is not present in any other. I mean, it's not present in Quran. I don't think it's present in Bible. Uh, I'm not sure whether it's present in Guru Granth Sahib or not, but at least Quran and Bible, I don't think this is present. So there is the religious sort of foundations of Varna system from which the Jati system came on later. So Varna system basically divided the whole group of population, which was invaded by the European sort of migration of Aryans or the Pontic steppe people into two categories. One category was basically the Aryas, and the other was Anaryas, or then they named it in different particular forms. So within the Arya group, they formulated three categories. And these three categories were not very strictly defined categories. People used to move around in these categories. Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and you have Vaishyas. They all used to move around. The third category, which was basically the conquered category of people, Dravidians, and the Harappan culture, the Indus Valley civilization people, they became the Dalit, the present Dalit, or Shudra. And in fact, the word Shudra has a very interesting sort of origins. Shudra, do people know what Shudra mean? Does anyone know what Shudra mean? Shudra means pure. Shudra means pure. Shudra comes from Shuddha. And if you go back, Shuddha, it comes from Shuddha. Shuddha means pure. So Shudra, if you go back in the scriptures, the Brahmin scriptures, Brahma is the creator of the universe. And the Brahma had all sorts of things. Brahma also had a couple of kids who became seers and sages. The 10 seers and sages of the Vedic sort of literature. One of them is Atreya. Atreya is one of the rishis or the saints or seers who basically had this kind of the revelation, which became the Rig Veda, the oldest one. And Atreya's wife's name was Shudra. So Shudra in itself was not a discriminatory. The origins of Shudra, the word Shudra, doesn't have discriminatory sort of meaning. But then, because the Dravidians or the Indus Valley civilization people were basically conquered people, this gradually shifted. The meaning shifted. And then you will see from Varna system, gradually as the Aryans moved in through the Indus Valley to other parts of the India or the Indian subcontinent, the Jati system started happening. So the Jati system was much more, branching out of this particular hierarchy. But this foundation of the Jati system or the Varna system is not found in any other religion. So therefore, if we talk about the Biradari system of some Muslims, it's not present in many South Asian Muslim communities. It's present in mainly Kashmiris and Punjabis. That is also of sort of Pakistani, Kashmiri, Pakistani, Punjabi sort of communities. And the Biradari system is basically a kind of a regional sort of affiliation, a tribal sort of affiliation, rather than being a caste affiliation. So one Biradari might think that we are superior compared to you, but the other Biradaris will also think that we are superior compared to you. So Patwaris might think that we are superior to Chaudhry, Chaudhry might think they are superior to them, but there is no religious, that foundational ideological grounding to their superiority, which is present within the Aryan Brahmin sort of system. That's one thing that we should keep in mind when we are trying to analyze this particular situation. The other thing which now I would like to problematize this entire scenario. The question is, there are 150, as Lake said, there are 150,000 Dalits, Shudras, whatever you want to call them, people of that particular origin present in the UK. In the UK, they are relatively free from naked sort of physical violence. There is discrimination, obviously there is discrimination, but they have nothing of the sort that Indian Dalits face is present here. So the question is, why are they still connected with this thing called Hinduism, when the entire ideological system is there to discriminate against them? I mean, whatever they can do, they can go legal route or they can do whatever route. So the foundational principles are set that cannot be undone. I mean, you cannot say that the Rig Veda should be thrown away, or the Vedas should be thrown away, or the Ramayana should be thrown away, or Mahabharata should be thrown away. What are you going to throw away from Hinduism? So what I'm saying is that Hinduism is fundamentally intertwined with the Varna system. You cannot have Aryan Brahmanism, or what is called Hinduism, without the Varna system. And this is I'm sure this is clear to a lot of people, because I've met a lot of people who are intellectuals, Dalit intellectuals. So why are they still attached to this particular thing, right? Why is this still important part of their identity? I mean, this is a question I'm throwing at. Maybe this is a question that need to be looked at. That's it. That's something which I wanted to mention. Okay.
If I can just add to that, yes, I think it is only Hinduism that categorizes people into that. No other religion has these categories. In fact, Sikhism actually was founded on abolishing such categories. But nonetheless, invasion of Mughals and the British, and none of these imports of different cultures were able to actually destroy the foundation of Hinduism. And you have people like Mahatma Gandhi says that if you get rid of the Varnas, you have essentially you are destroying Hinduism. You will destroy Hinduism. So it seems that Hinduism actually survives on that basis, and since the controllers of Hinduism are very rich, very powerful, they're occupying every institutions that control society, it is very, very difficult to dislodge them. Now, having said that, that it is only Hinduism that has these categories, but in practice, what is happening in India is that people will go into the mosque and they will all pray together. But when they come out, you'll have the low caste going in one direction, living in one section of the village, and you have the Chaudhrys and they will go in another direction. They will live in another part of the village, and you will find that the different communities will not share the same cemeteries. And the same will happen with the Indian Christians. you will have different burial grounds for the lower caste, and you have a different burial grounds for the upper caste converts into Christianity from the upper caste. So, you know, there seems to be no religion in India that Sikhism is again the same, you know. Although Sikhism was based on eradicating these differences, but you will still find that you have apartheid system in every village set up in India, you know, and you know, the Jats will live in one area, the Brahmins will live in one area, and the untouchables will live in another area, and they don't mix. And you will normally find that the waste water from the villages will flow from the upper caste areas down into the lower caste areas. And you will find that the upper caste will always live on the side where the sun rises, and the lower caste will always live on the side that the sun sets. So this is the whole set of the Indian society, which keeps on maintaining the caste system. And the other thing is that although people have started to share food, but sharing food is not enough to eradicate the caste divides. The only real way of eradicating the caste divide is to have intermarriages, which is forbidden. So.
Can I come in? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, Nazir.
Right, sir. It's very interesting. First of all, I want to thank Surinder and Thomas, who in a way guided me to be able to participate today. I showed my interest to join the group. I have personal problem at the moment. I was asked to make some contribution and will do that in time. But tonight's discussion, further actually elaboration and discussion. One is the root of caste system in subcontinent and its appearance in comparative communities, religious communities, ethnic, regional, geographical. And there are a lot of, complexity in that, similarities and differences. The other is how actually that has percolated in Britain after 3 generations. We still have that kind of reappearance of those caste discriminations or prejudices occurring in various communities. And this research with Lake has been done in Punjabi community, which is very commendable. And the only comparable work was done in 60s, 70s, I think, by Ballard and associates in Pakistani Punjabi community, Kashmiri community, on Biradri and kinship. I think that's 2 confusing parallels between Biradri, kinship in Pakistani, Kashmiri, Punjabi, or Muslim communities in subcontinent, and caste and jati. If I say that Biradri as a concept incorporates cooperative ethos, like actually a simple society having organic solidarity within sociological, discipline, mainly, by classical, actually, masters who have said that in simple society, people come together to really help support each other. As society develops and becomes more complex and subject to innovations, industry, and other development, it becomes more diverse. And in that diversity, there are still people coming together either cooperative basis or conflict basis, and they are called mechanical in jargon terms, solidarity. In India, Biradri Muslim community really signifies that simple society occurrence. People basically Baradari in subcontinent in Pakistan, Punjab, and West Indian Kashmir is a concept based on cooperative, principle. You help each other. Within Biradri, there are subsections, okay, and they are based. Those subsections are based on occupation and trade and things you do, and these are adaptation to actually cultural, ecological, and physical impact of people coming from either from Muslim communities coming from or in two ways. Your invaders who originally came in 17th, 8th century from Arabian Peninsula under Umayyad rulers, and then those who came from Central Asian route, and they were 13th, 14th century. And in them there are actually invaders of brutal type from Babur to Mahmud Ghaznavi, as well as rishis and preachers and all that. But they brought with them their own brand of Islam. The Arabian Peninsula was Bedouin, basically those who had control of the might of Islam and power, and they were actually basically Arabs. But those who came from Central Asia, they were very diverse. People from, Iran, Persian background, or also from Spanish of Persian, because they were much more advanced culturally. The issue of really Muslims in India adopting some of the Hindu traditions in social or cultural environment, even economic and other doing jobs and work, are definitely influenced by the indigenous culture and dominant culture of very thousand years. And this is nothing new. Any ideology, any religion, any actually philosophy, having access to people in new land, it has to adapt. Okay. For example, culturally they adopted a lot of traditions within Baradari system which are actually job related. You're doing, if you are doing shoemaking, you are called mochi. If you are doing actually woodwork, you are tarkhan. Same actually classification as in Hindu and Muslim communities. Similarly, if you are actually at a different level, if you are part of ruling elite, if you are part of educated elite, you have been given different names, Sayyids or Rajas or Khwajas or all that. So these similarities are basically part of adapting to a new society, adapting to a new culture, and using those existing paradigms, if I can use the jargon, those way of thinking and making sense of reality to have access to ordinary people. And those paradigms all actually invaded, adopted. Babur did, and also rishis from Kashmir, in Kashmir and Pakistan, Sufiyai, Kalam जिसने कहते हैं, Amir Khusro से from Amir Khusro to really Baba Bulle Shah, they took on the existing cultural norms of the land they had to really make their home. So in that, there are, for example, Biradari work done by Britain, for example, and it was very limited. Actually, they only looked at, collaborative and cooperative aspects. People from, Pakistan, Kashmir, or Kashmiri Pakistani here, and how they were, cooperating. But in that cooperation, there are discriminations. For example, within Baradari, if you are a Jat, you have a different position. If you are a Raja, you have a different position. Rajas all got together for cooperative purpose in subcontinent, always abroad, but within that there are sub sections. Same as Jati and Caste in Indian. So I think that work should be further explored. What is the constant in all these or common is really discrimination, and discrimination has been happening throughout history. Wherever these people, even if they went abroad, they couldn't get rid of it. For example, I tell you that Britain, when in 60s and 70s, we were all Asian. Okay, knowing that yes, there are differences of religion and geographical aspect, division of India and Pakistan, but for the survival's sake, the people in Britain in the 60s were all united under Asian title. And then slowly and gradually, when there were some of the activists or, friend makers in the society in British life, try to have an access to, the legal or democratic system to have their voice heard, they started forming organization around their nationality, Indian Association, then Pakistani Association, then Kashmiri and Bangladeshi, as things developed in homeland. And that's another aspect of diaspora community. They feel abroad a kind of affinity with their homeland, which is not real. It's assumed because things are moving, they haven't moved. So the kind of prejudices we brought with us in Britain started actually showing their colors in 80s, when there was from the government's side, the post-81 Scarman, report against, racist rights and discrimination. Because up to 80, Indian Workers Association was founded in 40s in Britain. To follow that, their own, Pakistani Association. Then come 70s, East Pakistan was separated from West. Bangladeshi formation association came, then Kashmiri. But they were united in one issue. So we'll fight actually discrimination based on ethnicity, color, and race. Okay.
Thank you, Saif.
Can I quickly just try to get back to what we were discussing?
Yeah.
As far as Saif's point that earlier, that why do the Dalits hang on to that identity? I think that's fundamentally looking at it backwards. The thing is, it's the upper castes' discrimination and ill treatment and contempt for them that forces them to hang on to that category. It's not a choice that they can voluntarily make. The key thing is the oppression of that particular group. And secondly,
sorry, Jim. Sorry, I didn't understand that point. How is it the upper castes domination, oppression that keeps them into that category?
In Britain,
they're defined.
In Britain,
they're defined.
How in Britain, how does upper caste discrimination and oppression keep the lower caste bound with their Hindu identity?
Because they are regarded as untouchable by the Jats and the Brahmins and the higher Gujarati caste and so on. They're still regarded as untouchable, and they're treated as untouchable. They're treated with contempt. They're also discriminated against, and so therefore they maintain their identity to fight against that. I can't see any reason to suppose that they would want to maintain an identity which is regarded as being despicable out of choice. And in terms of that, they then take the choice, many of them, to fight back, and then to use that identity in a positive way to struggle against the oppression they have.
But they have in the past tried to get out of Hinduism, like, go into Buddhism or something like that, or even Islam, or, so that they have resisted that category in different ways before.
I don't think that's so. I don't think when Ambedkar converted to Buddhism that he was resisting being who he was and the people he was. It was a way of fighting back against the role which they have within the Hindu system by getting out of the Hindu system. But there was still the people who supported Ambedkar were still forced to maintain their identity because that was what forced on them by the oppression.
Yeah, that's a dominant label, as it were. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry,
Sorry.
that's an arguable point, obviously, with Saif. But the other thing I was going to say, which relates directly to what Lek was saying, is that there is a quite a strong intellectual movement among the Hindu upper castes, and there's led by a chap called Prakash Shah, who's a professor in Queen Mary University, London, who argues the sort of intellectual side of defending the Hindu Mahasabha point of view. And one of the main arguments he puts is that caste is really not fundamentally a Hindu thing at all, that it was imposed upon the Indian society by the British. That is a corruption of an argument by an American anthropologist called Dirks, who has done considerable research to show the way in which the British colonialists used the caste system in conjunction with the Brahmins. But Shah has taken that point to an extreme, effectively to say that there isn't any original Indian basis to caste. It was something that was forced on them by colonialists, and by, as Lek said, that they are then saying it's the Dalits who, by protesting, they are maintaining that system which was forced on them by colonialism. And if they would just forget it, then people could go on into, marrying within their groups, but there wouldn't be any discrimination. There wouldn't be any problem at all. And that's his intellectual argument. It's a very dangerous argument, and obviously effectively supports the right-wing forces in the Hindu upper castes. So if I could just ask one question of Lek, specifically in relation to discrimination, what concrete forms does the discrimination take, which it is possible to actually address by legal means?
Unmute.
Can I just ask one question in addition to that, not necessarily related? Nick. The other one is, so there's been all the resistance from the Hindu groups. I just wanted to ask, has there been any resistance from the Sikhs in terms of the legislation proposed?
Yes, to Surinder's question, the two most vociferous oppositions we have had is from the Hindu Council, Hindu Forum, who are supported by this, a section of the Sikh community. And they have been very, very, very vociferous about it. But there are sections in the Sikh community, like we had the Lord King, and I forgot the Inderjit Singh as well, who have actually supported the legislation. So there is a support. There is a coalition between the Hindus and the so-called Jat community in Sikh that are opposing the legislation. Now, coming back to what James is saying, yes, I mean, we have supported 4 legal cases because we've taken it through case law, which is not the route we wanted, because we want the law to be there so that it actually acts as a deterrent, and it's actually, a law will actually change the mindset of people. Now, let me just give you one example. In Coventry, we had a Valmiki young man who who fell in love with an upper caste Jat girl, and they worked both in the same firm, or in a lawyer's firm, and the bosses of it were the upper caste in that firm, and they hated the fact that these two people have fallen in love with each other and are marrying each other, and they did the damnedest to not to allow wage rises, not to allow promotions, and they did the damnedest to actually prevent that marriage taking place. But the marriage will actually happen, but this guy took them to court, and eventually there was the settlement was done outside court. It never went all the way through, but we supported this guy all the way through, and he was given quite a lot of compensation for being discriminated on the grounds of caste. That was one case we fought. Then we had another case in London. This Dalit girl was working in a bakery, and she would be taunted every day by this upper caste Jat fellows, saying, look at this, Jamari, coming here, and and this went on for a long time, and eventually she realized that these derogatory marks were directed at her, and she went to the personnel and complained. And the personnel just didn't understand, because because it's not racism, so they don't understand the law. So eventually the girl came to us and said that this is what is happening to her, that she is being constantly victimized, and derogatory remarks are being passed against her. And her husband tried he was also working there. He tried best to tell this this offensive guy, stop it, cool it down, and all that, but it didn't happen. Eventually we supported her. We supported her and took her to industrial tribunal, that the equality of opportunity and discrimination is not being looked at in their firm. And eventually the girl won the case. The guy who did the discrimination was sacked and he left, and a substantial amount of compensation was given to this girl. But she had to go through traumatic, trauma to actually get to this stage. Then we have this guy. He was from Maharashtra. He worked for Tata Institute of Management, and he was a very high flyer, very big job. But he felt that he was constantly being denied because he was of a lower Mahar caste, I think it was. He was constantly being denied promotions and things like that. He also won compensation and won his case because he was being discriminated on grounds of caste discrimination. So yes, I mean, coming back to what Saif is saying, why are Dalits actually reinforcing their identity? Unfortunately, identity has become.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. Lake, sorry, I'm not saying that. Sorry. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that first of all, it has a very geographical context. I'm saying in the UK, the discrimination, that is the oppression, discrimination, violence faced by Dalits is nothing compared to what Indian Dalits have been facing for whatever number of years. You all agree on that. right? The naked violence.
I
that
will
we
agree. I
right?
agree on that. I agree
Right.
on that.
So
Absolutely, you're
yeah. So
you're
what I'm saying is that what is the reason? What is the reason that the Dalits in the UK, who have been well settled here for whatever number of years, are still sticking to the Hindu identity, still sticking to their Hindu identity? Given that Hinduism or
yeah.
Aryan Brahmanism fundamentally constitutes this discriminatory layers, hierarchies, Varna system, Jati system, and so on and so forth.
Well, let me give you an example on this one, Saif, and I tell you, and this is not Hindu identity, let's call it a Sikh identity. Whether you're going to join Sikhism and Hinduism together is another debate we can have. But I remember in the 60s when we came here, and Nazir was touched upon this, that everybody was saying, that there was no you are this category, you're that category. We were all immigrants, and we were all migrants from migrant laborers, and we stuck together and we fought many battles against racism and things like that. So I understand where Nazir is coming from. But after the 60s, when previously there were just men folk that came over here, but then eventually in the late 60s and the 70s, the women folk started coming over. And it was then that the family structures started taking place, and it was then when, okay, the kids have to be married. Where do you marry them? Who do you marry them with? That was what started the whole, the identity thing. I remember in Derby, every community in Punjabi community paid, and Dalits actually paid a lot of money to get this Gurdwara, Sikh Gurdwara built. But eventually, as time went on, the Dalits weren't allowed to be committee members. Dalits weren't allowed to be in the kitchen, because they were polluting. So it was that kind of practice, that kind of discrimination that forced the Dalits then to create their own gurdwaras, and it's like the common utensils which people used to, big pots and pans that people had for parties and weddings, the Sikh gurdwaras would say, no, you can't have it. So it was that kind of thing, which reinforced the identities. And those identities, unfortunately, have continued and are still continuing. And based on that, it is the discriminatory practices are still going on.
Okay, shall we wind up?
And I would like to say just one more.
Okay.
Sorry, go.
Yeah. Okay, you say briefly. Nazir. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to say one more thing, Nazir, and that is, you touched on a very important point earlier, that later on, Pakistani Workers Association, Bangladeshi Workers Association, Indian Workers Association, all worked together. Then in the 70s, I think it was, the British government started creating these under the of equality, equal opportunities. They started splitting.
Lake,
they started splitting. Pakistanis could have their own community center. The Bangladeshis could have their own community.
Lake, up to 80s, we were winning as collective, under collective identities, as actually, Asians or Afro-Caribbeans, up to 80. It was 80s, riots in North and London, which prompted a royal commission under Lord Scarman. And his report came out in 81, published, and it was adopted by the government of the day, that there is an institutional racism which must be eradicated, and there were some guidelines. And Labour Party then set up a 78 under Manpower Service Commission, an organization to actually work on equal opportunities. A lot of lectures from various colleges and universities were seconded. The point is that part of the government was actually to polarize, and break up these collective identities into subsections, which helped them to actually it didn't help. 10 years, all the public and private industry organization, from top to bottom, were given equal opportunity, training for weeks and months. Legislation was there, but because it was not followed in the civil society, it failed. We still have today, those laws which are not implemented. Go back to gender equality laws; they are still not implemented. So one of the work you are doing is commendable. I would say that you need to look at that history and really start focusing on in civil society or on civil society itself. This argument has to go into the community to look at this discrimination, aspect. Just to finish, the point raised by Saf, the young intellectual who is it Saf? He was saying that Dalit, why the Dalit can't, leave the Hinduism. I mean, this is really, battering the victim rather than addressing the culprit. The question is to fight, this in legal terms and legislative terms in Britain, if we are to really function as a democratic society. Yeah, Saf, your point is not really helping the victim. You are saying, oh leave Hinduism. Why, I mean, strip them of their identity. Give them support to fight the culprit. British government is lip servicing. There are no actually support in institution on equal opportunity. Gender equality laws haven't been implemented yet on equal pay. Anti-racist laws haven't been actually implemented on equal opportunity today. So we need to work collectively on two fronts. One is actually keep this struggle at institutional level, and asking British government not to look at cultural relativism. We have to actually establish a moral, actually, ground. There is absolutism on morality. Discrimination is wrong, whether it's in Bangladesh, India, Kashmir, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, on gender, race, or sexuality, or in Britain. That's the
Okay, Surinder.
No, I think Kalpana wants to go first, and then I'd like to go after that.
Who is that? Saif.
Kalpana wants to go first.
Kalpana.
She was first.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Lek, for introducing and the discussions. I think that just to sort of take up what Saif is saying, I think you're right that oppressed community and things, part of the oppression is also the ideological oppression. So you do take on a lot of the ideas and things that you're born with. But part of the fight back is also the identity, and you can turn that into something positive, like when African American brought up the term Black. It started as a very derogatory and discriminatory and abusive term, but they used that to turn into something positive. And so I think in India, I think there is because of the constitutionally, and think there was this positive placing and etc. There was this encouragement to keep your own caste and identify your own caste, which instead of, it's actually perpetuated the continuation of caste rather than help to improve it, although the idea was to improve the fight against the discrimination. So similarly here, I think a lot of people talk about the artisan and all that ability from their own caste. They link it to their personal identity. I think that's becoming, that's where the caste sometimes is used. Yes, I think the government, American policies and British government policies of dividing various communities, national communities that that was alliance, but part of that alliance has never existed, I don't think, within the castes. And I think that will actually continue. I think a lot of the Hindutva and various Hindu organizations now, right-wing organizations, are trying to include different castes and trying to, by sort of saying progressive and anti-caste rhetoric. And I think that's going to continue because now the fight is against Muslims rather than within, so that's where the alliance, they're trying to get the alliance of different castes to fight against Muslims in case of India. So I think there is a definite recruitment of that group.
Okay, then, Surinder.
Yeah, thank you, Leah.
This is the last question.
Why?
You want to go on?
Okay, all right. Anyway, just 2 points that came to my mind is that one, when we say that, oh, it was okay before the women and the children came, that there wasn't any casteism that was observable, I suppose, at the time. And I suppose to a certain extent that is true, because as men, there wasn't a community as such. So, the shops and the gurdwaras and everything, the schooling, and all of that sort of came later. But if you actually looked at the IWA and the casteism within that, I think, that was still, that is and was still quite prevalent, in terms of who's got the most important positions, who has the most say, etc. So I think even in the workerist sort of struggles, casteism is actually quite embedded in that. And that, there's the various communist parties and other parties in India speak to that too. And I'm sure the sort of similar sort of types of things will be operating within the main political parties here too. Within Punjabi and within Indian communities anyway. But so when women and children come, you do then get the establishment of the community and, the gurdwaras and the community shops and all of that sort of thing. And I'm sort of wondering, obviously, it's much more evident within the family system in terms of who you marry and how your children are brought up and how you teach prejudice to your children, etc., against caste and things. But that does also bring to mind how far patriarchy is embedded in the caste system. So why is it that when women and children come, it becomes much more intense, not just in terms of marriages and things, but in the practices, the religious and the ritualistic practices of the temples and the gurdwaras as well. So I think, there is that association between caste and patriarchy as well. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Shall we wind up or you want to continue? I think if there is interest, we can have another day of discussion. Life wanted to say something. Paul wanted to say something.
I just wanted to say one thing, that we are discussing whatever we are discussing, but we should not forget, we should not ignore the agency of the oppressed. We should not use the usual sort of leftist track of oppressed being sort of object of our pity and so on and so forth. Oppressed people also have agency. Similarly, Dalits also have agency. They can take actions to disengage themselves from the identity, the fundamental identity, which institutes this, which imposes this oppression on them. So saying that they want, why should we not ask this particular question? Why Dalits are latching on to, in Britain, they are latching on to Hindu and Sikh identity? This is a fundamental question, because only through this question we can see that Dalits, a fundamental part of Dalit identity is Hindu identity. And if you have Hindu identity, you cannot get away from caste discrimination, the Varna system. You cannot. It's there. It's just sitting there. I mean, you can create laws and you can create whatever you want to create, but yeah, they have been creating laws in India for 70 years. Yeah, sure.
Paul wanted to say something. Paul, you are muted.
Saif has just posed a postmodernist question. We can discuss it further.
Leg, we can wind this up. Since there is an interest in this, Leg can come out with some more ideas. We can also discuss about caste system in India.
Next week, we should do next week as well, because there are a couple of very interesting things, not interesting, horrendous things happening in India around Dalits. So recently a Dalit, yeah.
We can continue.
Supreme Court just found in favour of the defendants in the Madrid temple. Mosque.
Yeah.
They've been acquitted.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
after 28 years.
Okay, then thank you very much. Lake, are you willing to carry on for the next week? You have to unmute.
Lake, you're
unmute.
I think we need to explore this identity politics, which is a very important part of the whole discussion. And how do we actually look at caste and class and how do they interact, and how can we take class and class struggle together and take it forward? That's an interesting thing. I think we could have a more discussion on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good idea.
Okay, then what shall we do next week? Identity, theoretical discussion, identity.
Yeah,